Hi, I'm Stan Shapiro. A warm welcome. I titled this talk, How George Washington Endorsed Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Candidacy for President. Subject will be to consider, reread, and study George Washington's farewell address to the citizens of the United States. I think you're going to find this eye-opening about how prescient and relevant George Washington's farewell advice is in relation to what we are seeing and living here today in 2024. What is George Washington's farewell address? In 1796, as George Washington was approaching the end of his second term as president, he prepared his farewell address and published it. He had input in the drafting by James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, but the final draft that was presented for publication was in George Washington's own hand. Let's appreciate who George Washington was, what he had accomplished. We all know him as the first president. What's very telling is that in the generation of the founding fathers, and it was a generation unique in human history of this confluence of thinkers and political thinkers and politicians and patriots, that generation that includes Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and Benjamin Franklin and James Madison and Alexander Hamilton and Patrick Henry and John Marshall, Thomas Paine, just to name a few. When they were choosing among them who was going to be the leader, who was their leader, it was George Washington. George Washington, the commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Army. Thereafter, they elected George Washington as the first president of the United States. He was the only president who received the unanimous votes of the Electoral College. He did it twice. In 1796, he was not term limited out. He could have run again, and he certainly would have won re-election. But he chose to step aside, not to run. He tells us in his farewell address, he says he's not unconscious in the outset of the inferiority of his qualifications, of my qualifications, is how he says it. With all that he accomplished, he has that humility, describing himself of the inferiority of his qualifications. He's recognized, he has the self-awareness of his advancing age and his slowing down and possibly he sees his diminished capacities from age. Wouldn't that be something that we wish that our current president and past president who are seeking further election would be able to examine themselves? So George Washington writes in his farewell address, he says, "Every day the increasing weight of years admonishes me more and more that the shade of retirement is as necessary to me as it will be welcome." He also recognizes, he says, "I have the consolation to believe that while choice and prudence invite me to quit the political scene, patriotism does not forbid it." Now, the language is somewhat archaic, but what he's saying is that he's slowing down and he's confident for the good of the nation. There are others more than capable to take up that high office of the presidency after him. He sets the example for posterity that he is not a king. That's one of the reasons they chose him. They unanimously chose Washington, recognizing this character, his humility. They were confident that he would not set himself up as a king against them. And basically, that character that is so rare among human nature, that he could step aside from the highest office, put his ego aside to do what is in the best interest of the country and not what his perceived best interest of himself. So that preliminary example is, I think, useful for the situation today. Trump is the polar opposite, talking in terms of humbleness. He also should be an example to President Biden in recognizing that maybe it is time to move aside, that you can't do what you once were able to do. By the way, George Washington's age when he announced that he would not be seeking re-election was 64 years old. And now Republican and Democratic candidates, when they ran, Trump and Biden, in 2020, they were the oldest candidates ever to run for president. What I really want to present for consideration from Washington's farewell address is his prescient insight as he gives lessons and teachings and advice for posterity he publishes what he calls his learned advice on the occasion offered to our solemn contemplation, and he recommends it to our frequent review. He describes as, quote, some sentiments which are the result of much reflection and no inconsiderable observation. So he says he's given this a lot of thought, and this is on the career as the preeminent of the founding fathers. And he says this advice appears to him to, quote, be all important to the permanency of our felicity as a people. As a felicity, it means as our happiness and well-being. He is explicitly giving us America teaching precisely for after he is gone, when he is no longer there. And what is this teaching that he gives? Among these, he emphasizes that the unity of government, which constitutes us as one people and is now dear to us, he describes this as it is the main pillar in the edifice of our real independence. That the unity of the United States and of the people is so important. He says that it's necessary to our real independence, to the support of your tranquility at home, your peace abroad, of your safety, of your prosperity, of that very liberty which you so highly prize. How do we preserve? He's telling us we have to remain united as a people. We have to work in the common interest, set aside differences, and work in the common interest of the United States, of the common good. And that will be necessary to preserve our liberty and our strength and our happiness and safety. In fact, he goes, it is of infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness. Okay, so how do we do this? He says, citizens, by birth or choice of a common country, that country has a right to concentrate your affections. He's a patriot, and the patriotism extends to all the citizens. Is imposed on that duty on all the citizens by birth and choice, emphasizing the value and importance of appealing to finding our common interests, what unite us, not what divides us. The importance and significance of George Washington's advice for the ages for the United States is recognized. One of the most central themes is not really observed, and that is he takes aim against political parties. So he writes, they serve to organize faction, close quote, they're divisive, there's faction. And then what is it? What about this? So he says, quote, to put in place of the delegated will of the nation, the will of a party, according to the alternate triumphs of different parties, to make public administration the mirror of the ill-concerted and incongruous projects of faction, rather than the organ of consistent and wholesome plans digested by common councils and modified by mutual interest. So that's, again, that archaic language is not so easy to follow, but what's clear is that he cautions about political parties that instead of pursuing the will of and the good of the nation, they tend to pursue the will of the party, and they've set aside the common good for what is best in the interest of the party. And don't we see that today in our Congress and in our politics, where, and this is on both parties, that we have this dysfunction in Washington precisely because the party leaders and the political leaders in Washington, we've seen this over this past year, where if they would put something to a vote, there would be a clear majority, a bipartisan majority in favor of certain kinds of policies, like increasing the security of the border was one of them. Put their party politics ahead, one side and the other, not wanting to let any victory go, what they perceive as anything that would be a victory to the other party that could advance the other party's election prospects, and rather they will disadvantage the interests of the country. George Washington anticipates this, and he warns us about it. And here, almost 230 years later, we're living it. He continues in the address, however parties may now and then answer popular ends. So he recognizes that parties may serve some popular purposes. Parties do have good reasons for their existence, but Washington says the risks outweigh the benefits. He cautions. He says, so they say they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp for themselves the reins of government. Parties become the engines by which ambitious, cunning, unprincipled men, I don't want to be name calling, he's talking about human characters, personality, human traits. It's not one person. He, along with the other founding fathers, had such a deep understanding of human nature. And he warns us that these parties will tend to enable them to subvert the power of the people and usurp the reins for themselves, the reins of government. Then he continues, I have already intimated to you the danger of parties in the state. He says, let me take a more comprehensive view and warn you in the most solemn manner against the baneful effects of the spirit of party generally. He's gone off, he's talked about a couple of things, and he comes back to this central warning about political parties. He's telling us, citizens in posterity, beware. He continues, this spirit, and he's talking about the spirit of party, unfortunately is inseparable from our nature, having its roots in the strongest passions of the human mind. Here he's anticipating and warning what will lead to the present state we find ourselves. And tell me if you don't see this. I mean, consider if this is not brilliantly prescient. It's prescient and present. He says, the alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension, which in different ages and countries has perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. So he's warning us that the parties will result in this, what he calls the spirit of revenge. He says it's natural to party dissension. Let's say when the Republican Party takes over the government from the Democratic Party, they will pursue revenge on the Democrats. And when the Democratic Party takes over power from the Republican Party, they will likewise similarly pursue revenge on the other party, on the Republicans. Is that not what we are seeing and hearing? They're saying this part out loud. I mean, we're seeing it it play out in front of us, and they're saying it, and George Washington forecast this. He told us this is where party politics will lead us. Now, he worries that this leads to despotism, that is tyranny, that is the defeat of the Democratic Republic, but he doesn't say it has to happen for it to be bad. He says, without looking forward to an extremity of this kind, without looking forward to the actual end of democracy, which he then is, and parenthetically he says, which nevertheless ought not to be entirely out of sight. Washington's farewell address continues, quote, the common and continual mischiefs of the spirit of party are sufficient to make it the interest and duty of a wise people to discourage and restrain it. He says we don't have to wait or worry that it's actually going to destroy the tendencies are enough that we should try to discourage and restrain this domination of political parties, which he then continues, says, parties serves always to distract the public councils and enfeeble the public administration, this spirit of the parties. It agitates the community with ill-focused jealousies and false alarms, kindles the animosity of one part against another. You ready for this? It foments occasional riot and insurrection. Washington writes in the farewell address that the parties and this spirit and this factionalism that it engenders, and I will repeat it, he says it foments occasional riot and insurrection. This is, he writes in 1796, what happened in 2020 and what we're living today. He recognizes the limits of his advice. So he has this advice, and he knows that there's a tendency for parties, and he knows that parties actually serve some good. He's warning us the risks of that good outweigh the benefits, but he offers for a remedy, for occasional remedy, as he's concluding. And he is talking for when he's gone, for down the ages. He wants this to be reread, and he wants us to have it in our mind, we, the citizens of the United States, and try to protect ourselves and remedy ourselves from when this happens. Sometimes he says it gets worse. And aren't we living that now? In his own words, he says, quote, "In offering to you, my countrymen, these counsels of an old and affectionate friend, I dare not hope that they will make the strong and lasting impression I could wish." He does this, "I dare not hope that maybe they will control the usual and current passions, but then," he says, "if I may even flatter myself that they may be productive of some partial benefit, some occasional good, that they may now and then recur to moderate the fury of party spirit, then this hope will be of full recompense for the solicitude of your welfare." So he's giving this, he's hoping, my words, if only they can be of occasional good when it's most needed, may now and then recur to moderate the fury of party spirit. Have we experienced in our lifetimes the fury of party spirit that we have today? This is the time, my fellow Americans, that Washington is speaking and warning to us. So let me circle back. So what do I mean that George Washington endorsed Kennedy for election for president in 2024? This is the remedy that George Washington counsels us today to moderate that fury of party spirit, to protect against this factionalism that foments occasionally even riot and insurrection. He says, reject the political parties, at least now and then. And there's no more pressing time than now. Most strikingly, George Washington is telling us, he's counseling us, he's teaching us, we should not vote along party lines. We should not vote for the party candidate. It is the parties, one could say the corrupted parties, that is the Democrats and the Republicans, and their sycophant media corporation adherents who tell us that it has to be one party or the other. You have to vote for the Democratic candidate or you have to vote for the Republican candidate. But that's not what George Washington, father of our nation, the great first president, the great commander-in-chief, president of the Constitutional Congress, he tried to teach us something different. He cautions just the opposite. Vote independent of the parties, Washington tells us. Now, we have a qualified independent candidate running this year to choose from, Robert F. Kennedy. And we have this unique special election year. The Democrats and the Republican parties, they're shoving on us the weakest choice of candidates we've ever had, saying this is your choice, one or the other. 70%, maybe more, of the voters of America, of the American people, say we don't want either of them. The DNC and the RNC and the power structure that parties have, that they have this stranglehold on our government and on our choice of president. They say, tough luck. You have to vote for one or the other, or otherwise you waste your vote. But Washington tells us just the opposite. Washington warns us, no, don't vote for the party. Don't allow the party to have that stranglehold. The party is factionalism. The party divides us. The party seeks to enhance itself. The parties try to benefit themselves. They will forego the common good. They can't act. They want to advance their party interest, and in doing so, they sacrifice the public good and what legislators should be doing, and what the government should be acting for is for the benefit of all the people. And so this year, we have, in our lifetimes, we've never had a chance like this, and we've never needed to do it so much as today, is we can break that stranglehold of the party's control. Whatever the parties tell you, listen to Washington. It's the voters that have the power to do it. We have to do it. We can vote for the independent, and we have an independent candidate whose platform, his profile, he's of such grace. His whole platform is to unite us, to find the grounds that unite us, to engage in civil discourse, to get away from this. And let me tell you this: the way the parties are taking control is they are doing it this year more than ever just on fear. You don't hear why. The main thrust of the campaign from each party, the Democrat and the Republican, is you better vote for our guy, even though you don't want him. even though he hasn't given us a good reason why you should vote for him, even though there are many good reasons why you shouldn't vote for him, either the Democrat or the Republican. But you have to vote because you have to be afraid of what if the other side will win. Well, don't vote for the fear. We don't have to obey that fear. This is our chance. You have to vote for Kennedy. This still is the Congress. The founding fathers built in this system of checks and balances. Congress will still have a say and a limitation and a check and a balance on what President Kennedy might do in his first term. But this is our chance to break that stranglehold. So they can't tell us that you have no choice, that you must vote our guy even though we don't want your guy. That it will be so ameliorative, it will be so beneficial to our democracy to have an independent candidate win. They tell you you're going to throw your vote away because an independent can't win. And why not? Because in our lifetime, we haven't had an independent candidate win. But we never had a choice like this. We've never had a situation so factionalized, so divided like we've been living. It's getting worse and worse each election cycle. So we can change that. We, the voters, we, the people of the United States of America, as when we go to vote, we can change what they're saying, that obstacle that it can't happen. All you need to do is vote for Kennedy, vote for the independent. There are enough of us out there. It's already the movement is going, and if you listen to him, you will like a lot of what you hear. I can't say you will like everything, but you will like a lot of what you hear. And this is a man of integrity, of character, of humility. This is what we need in 2024. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance, my fellow Americans. Let's not miss this chance. We've got to do it. Thank you for your consideration. Don't take my word for it. Read George Washington's farewell address. Consider what George Washington told us. I think his teaching has more weight for how to preserve and best advance our United States than what you're hearing from these talking heads at the media corporations who are adhered to their political parties. Thank you very much.